There was a big article in the Wall Street Journal contrasting the economic profiles of J.D. Vance and Governor Walz, Tim Walz. And J.D. obviously came from super poor circumstances. It's actually a great American success story, and, you know, not necessarily repeatable by everyone, but you really love a story like that, right? Because it's a rags to riches story, and he grew up super poor in Appalachia and, you know, wound up at Yale Law School and was in the military and has a lot of money now because he's been a successful investor. And then you compare and contrast him with Governor Walz, who was a teacher, which is great, and then went into government, which is great, but he doesn't own his house. He doesn't own any stocks at all, like anything. He has a pension, I guess, his kid's college education fund, but that's it. And I look at that and I'm curious because we want to be careful. Like I understand, you know, not everybody can even afford to invest, but I keep saying you can't afford not to. Like, I'm sorry, you don't have a lot of money. Skip the latte, skip the, you know, the cocktail out at the local whatever, and make sure that you take that money. Or if you're going to do that, like split the difference, have one cocktail and take the other money and put it in something that is going to get some return at some point in your life, because you don't want to be Governor Walz. You don't want to be Tim Walz. What's your take on that? I mean, what do you make? Because keep in mind, like, the guy's been making six figures for the last however many years there. He was in Congress, now he's governor, and he doesn't own anything.
Yeah, it reminds me of like that World Economic Forum, like you'll own nothing and be happy. And maybe that's sort of what he's thinking.
Is that his strategy? But like, just to be clear, a lot of those people that say that actually have a ton of money in the bank, right? They can choose to not own their home because they don't want to be weighed down by earthly possessions, but they got a ton of money in the bank. He doesn't have that. He's got nothing in the bank. I mean, he's got a little, but not much.
I'm glad you brought it up. It was a fascinating article. And, you know, JD's portfolio, by contrast, was really interesting. He's in some crypto. He's got some real estate. He's got venture capital interests and equities. And, you know, and he and Usha, I think they're like 40 years old, right? So they're on their way, or they've been, you know, carefully building up their portfolio. But look, okay, so he was a civil servant and a social studies teacher. You know, my mother's a teacher. I come from a family of like kind of civil servants and teachers. Actually, you know what? They invested. They've always been invested. Now it's worked out quite well, right? And you know, growing up, I've always known like that's just what a responsible adult in American society kind of does. Is you don't have to be rich, but you have to save your money and you have to intelligently invest it in a way for the security of your future, your family, right? So I see like three possible explanations why Walz has basically no assets outside of his pension. Either he's financially illiterate, which is very alarming for someone who could be, you know, a heartbeat away from the Oval Office. It really has a very crude or basic understanding of economics, which is fine if you're a high school football coach. You don't need to have financial sophistication, but if you want to be the president of the United States and lead the free world and run a 24 trillion economy, you probably should have some level of sophistication. He's financially irresponsible, which also, you know, doesn't really bode well for a potential, you know, president of the United States.
And you say irresponsible because he's never saved anything.
Well, because he just doesn't have
for
like
his future. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean that he's neglected. You know, it's not that he needs to be rich. It's just like he hasn't even like set up accounts, right?
There's nothing.
Like it's like someone who doesn't have a bank account and just puts cash under their mattress or something. It's like look, it's fine, but it's like you shouldn't. That's not presidential. That's not a leadership level kind of personality. And then maybe the worst thing though is like maybe he doesn't actually believe in American capitalism, right? Like maybe he doesn't believe in the stock market. Maybe he doesn't believe in ownership of stocks and equities, and that the whole idea that's individuals should have that, you know, like he just wants to rely on his pension and his state salary. And that might be to me, like that's possibly the most jarring explanation for his lack of, you know, assets and a portfolio and kind of financial planning, is that he's morally opposed to it, or he thinks it's a conflict of interest. He thinks it's a conflict of interest to own U.S. equities as an American politician. it's one thing to be Nancy Pelosi, swinging your portfolio around and trading on inside information, perhaps, but it's another thing just to own a mutual fund.
Yeah, I mean, agreed. One of our viewers here, Don Bacco, who's fairly sophisticated in finance himself and used to trade on the Chicago Mercantile Exchange. I think I got that right, Don. He's laughing and saying, just to be clear, he's an assistant coach. Bruce Hodge saying maybe he has gold. I don't think he does. I mean, unless he's got some gold coins in the basement, I don't think he does. Like, I think actually Rob's onto something, which is just alarming because he seems to lack the sophistication to even just open up. I mean, they make it easy nowadays, guys. You go to Chase and JP Morgan Chase or Citi or Wells Fargo, any of these places, right? And you can tack on a brokerage account, and guess what? No fees. You can buy and sell and, do all your trading online with no fees. So it's pretty easy to do. But Tim Walz, for whatever reason, is making a decision. And I guess he's either making a decision or he's just really poorly sort of, I don't know quite the right word. I want to be generous here because I agree with you. Not everybody you don't have to make a lot of money. You don't have to save a ton of money, but do something for yourself and your family and your future. And he's not doing anything.